Okay, so let's see a simple example on finding an average of three numbers. Okay, so we already have written the algorithm here, the flowchart in here, and the pseudocodes is also written in here. Now let's see how to write a particular program, a C program based on this. Alright, okay, so let's open the Dev C, and we will see, like, we will take a new project. Okay, we will take a new project, and okay, I'm copy pasting the pseudocode which already I have written here. Okay, so since the arrow is not accepted in here, we will add this. Okay, so this is the pseudocode. All right, okay, so now we are going to convert this particular pseudocode into our program. All right, so now if I we know, already have gone through that every compiler will be searching for a function which is commonly called as the main function. Okay, so since my this main function is not going to return any is not going to carry any arguments, I am defining the main function as the data type I have given here is void. Alright, okay, so I have written void main in here. Okay, so the compiler will understand this is the start of the program, and it will execute. So since it is a main function, so it means that the function means that it have some task to perform, right? So it have some task to perform, so I have to mention from where to where this main function is about. So I have opened a double bracket, and by default the Dev C will give me the closing bracket too. Alright, so within this particular bracket I'll be writing on what I have to do. Alright, so the first task is I have to input n1, n2, n3, three numbers, right? Input, so I have to give like n1, n2, n3, three numbers I have to input. Alright, so now I have to also define that what this n1, n2, n3 is going to store. Alright, so let's say I'm going to store some integer values, some numbers. Okay, so I give as int n1, n2, n3. Alright, and we also know that every single line of the code will end with semicolon. It shows to the compiler that it is the end of a line, right? So we use a semicolon last. So I'm going to store integer values, so I have taken my data type as int in here. Alright, so then I have to find as sum is equal to n1 plus n2 plus n3, right? Good. So sum I have written in here, and then I have to find the average, so I will go for average is equal to sum by 3, right? So since I have three numbers, so I will go for average is equal to sum by 3. Alright, now then I have to print the average. Now we already have gone through that. To print a value, that is to display some output to the user, we use the keyword print format, printf, in our C program. Alright, so printf, and within double quotes I will be writing average, right? Alright, so this is I have actually given average, and yeah, the value is stored in avg, right? So I will have to write it avg. Yeah, right? Okay, so we have done our part. Yeah, I have forgotten a semicolon here, so I will show that it is the end of line, right? So let's see, since I have used printf in here, I will have to call a header file in here, right? So printf actually belongs to a header file called as std, standard input output, which we already have gone through, right? So I have to call the header file so that the compiler will understand this printf is a keyword. Okay, and this function, the role of this function, that is to display the output, all those set of codes are actually written in this standard input output library file. This is a header file. Alright, so let's compile and see if there is any errors. Okay, I have to save the file, so let's save this as average, and it is a C file, so I will save it as C. Oh, lot of errors are there. See, they are showing like it is not able to understand input, right? It is showing an error here. See, input in this particular line, that is why it was highlighted, right? So here we have some error. okay, and sum is also having some problem. So input is a problem, sum is a problem. It is not able to understand what these terms are. Actually, we never wanted the compiler to understand this, right? We don't want the compiler to understand this. So what actually we had to do was, this was our pseudocode. From this pseudocode we actually started to develop a program, right? So these lines are not for the compiler. Okay, so what we have to do, we have to insert a command line. Okay, so I can either insert, go like this, right? I can go like this. See, the color have changed. Now if I run this, let's see if this error goes. Yeah, so that particular error has been gone, but there it is showing a lot of other errors also, right? It is showing that it is not able to understand what this n1 is, n2 is, what the sum is. It's not able to understand. Okay, so let's make it clear for the program. We don't want the compiler to run all these programs. So let's have a common mechanism, that is, we will have, if we have n number of lines which has to be commented, we use slash and star. See, now everything has been changed to comment format. Now we have to define till this particular area. We don't want the compiler to understand it, so we go for star and slash in here. Why? See, now this particular line of codes have changed into command line, and the remaining is an active line, right? Okay, so if we had to use a single line to comment a single line, we use double slash and write average of 3 numbers, right? So this shows that it is, we are going to write an average of 3 numbers of program, and this is a pseudocode for it, and this is the program for it. Now if I compile, yeah, my errors has gone a little reduced, because it is the compiler having taken up these command line codes. Alright, but again we are having some error here. So the major error that is shown in here is sum. He is not able to understand what the sum is. Alright, so, and also he is not able to understand what this average is. Okay, what do you mean by average? What do you mean by sum? Alright, so this means that we have to define what the sum and average is all about, right? So we have, as we have defined for the integer int in here, okay, we have defined that n1, n2, n3, actually these are what going to store integer values. That is the meaning of this particular line. Same way we have to define what the sum is all about. What is this sum going to do? What is this average going to do? Okay, what sort of value they are going to store? Okay, so I have to mention that also. Let's say I am mentioning as int sum, okay, and average. Alright, and with a semicolon which shows that it is the end of line. Alright, so now let's compile and see. Yeah, good, very good. It is showing 0 errors and 0 warnings. See here, it is free from errors and warnings right now. Okay, because we just mentioned what the sum and average means. It got cleared with all the information it requires. Right, now let's compile, run the particular program. Average, it is showing average is average. It is not showing the value in here. See in here, it is showing what was written in here, right? I have written average is equal to average, so it have given average is equal to average in here itself. This wasn't what I was expecting. I wanted to find the average of the 3 numbers, right? Alright, so which are the 3 numbers I haven't mentioned in here? Okay, so I'm going to mention what are the values which I'm going to store. Let's say I have to store 2, 3, and let's say 5. Okay, so n1 will be storing this. What does this mean? This means that the value 2 will be moved on to n1. Okay, the value 3 is going to be stored on n2, and value 5 is going to be stored on n3, so that now I can find the sum and then average of 3 numbers. But this doesn't affect this, because in printf we have mentioned it as average is equal to average. This is not the way it has to be. I have to display the value which has been stored inside this particular average. So how do I do that? Okay, so to do that, instead of having this average in here, I'm going to specify a symbol in here. which is the percentage symbol. Now seeing the percentage symbol, the compiler will understand that okay, the compiler is going to expect that some sort of value has to be stored. Now which particular format of value, what type of value I have to display there? That is an integer value. So for integer value I use the symbol D here. Alright, okay, so I will use the value D here, and from then I have to mention from where this particular value has to be taken, from which particular variable the value has to be taken. So I have to find as the average. The average value has been actually stored over this particular average variable name, right? This particular average variable name. So I will write here, you have to take the value which has been stored in average, and the value has to be displayed in here. So this particular percentage D here is actually called as the format specifier. Okay, the format specifier. Now percentage D will give the compiler an idea that it have to display an integer value. Okay, it have to display an integer value over this particular location. And now from where I should take the value? I should take the value which is stored inside this average. Okay, I should take the value which is stored inside this particular average and should display it over this percentage D. Okay, now the percentage D, the compiler has already understood that it is an integer value it has to store, because we have used this format specifier, that is percentage D. Alright, now percentage D represents it as an integer value. Okay, so now let's compile and see what is happening. Okay, again zero errors, zero runs. Let's run the program. Perfect. So it is showing an average. If we look at here, we had something like average was in here, so it is displayed average at here, and then we had this percentage D in here, right? Now percentage D was actually changed with the value 3 in here. See that? The percentage D, because it have taken the value which was stored over the average and it have displayed that particular value over the percentage D, right? So that is why we have the value here. It is correct, right? 5 plus 3, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 10 divided by 3, and this division, this actually gives us the quotient value. So it is not going to give us the remainder value, it is going to give us the quotient value. Okay, right? So that is why we have the 10 divided by 3, right? We have the 10 divided by 3, it have the quotient 3 as a quotient, and the remainder will be 1, right? 3 into 3, 9, carries 1, the remainder will be 1, right? So it shows the quotient value, and the quotient value is actually displayed in here. Alright, okay, so I think it is all clear with you all. So now if I needed not the 3, I needed a decimal value. Okay, I needed a little more detailed value. Then what I have to do? I have to change this int to float, right? And so then now the sum and the average will be a float value. Now printf, instead of percentage D represent an integer value, now I have to display as a decimal value. So I will have to change the format specifier as, instead of having D, I will specify, I have a command called as F, percentage F. Now the percentage F will define that the average is a float value. Alright, okay, so the average is a float value. Okay, so now let's run and see if it is showing any decimal values or not. Alright, so wow, it is. See, now by using by using a term, just by changing the data type from integer to float, okay, I was storing the values in sum and average, and sum and average as decimal values, right? So it was able to display me, and I have informed the compiler that I want a percentage F to be shown, that is a decimal value to be shown. Okay, and I have mentioned it as from where I have taken, I have to take the value from average. So now it have taken, since in average it have stored a decimal value, I was able to display a decimal value. Okay, so now you may have a confusion like why not have integer itself? Okay, and if I give percentage %f, won't it show a decimal value, since I have asked for a float, a decimal format specifier here, right? No, it will not work. Now what happens is, I have compiled, I have 0 errors, 0 warning, everything is fine in here, right? Everything is fine in here. I have no errors or no warnings. But once when I run this particular program, I get an output as 0. See, I got an output as 0. It was expecting a percentage %f, that is a decimal value here. That is why the percentage %f shows that it's a format specifier, and this format specifier's role is it will display decimal value. It displayed decimal value, but the average was an integer value, right? The average was an integer value. So what happened was, the value stored was as integer, but it asked for a different format specifier. It wasn't asking for an integer value to be displayed, it was asking for a decimal value to be displayed. So the compiler got confused, so it returned a 0 here. Okay, so if we have to display a perfect value, I have to make this average 2 as a integer decimal value, so I change this as float. Alright, so if we want to know a little more detail on how the compile actually happened, how the result have come up, okay, let's debug and see what are the various things that is happening. Alright, so let's say we know that all the program will be started run from void main, right? So let's see from there. Okay, and let's watch what is going to happen over N1. So I will click on N1 and I will have a watch on N1. Okay, I will have a watch on N2. I will have a watch on N3. Okay, so I have these 3 watched in here. Now I will have a watch on what will happen on the sum, the variables. Okay, I will have a watch on all the variables in here. Okay, so I have included a watch. Well, let's see what is going to happen on each particular values, right? Okay, so I have marked, so right now it is showing execute to evaluate, which means they haven't stored any values right now. It is having some we have just called up all the variables available in here. Alright, so let's see what is going to happen. Okay, so I'm going to debug it. Okay, I'm going to debug it. Okay, the output screen is available in here. Okay, I have asked for recompiling. Okay, I have recompiled the program. Now since I have changed from integer to float here, so I have recompiled. Now let's debug it. Okay, so the output screen is available in here. Okay, it is being ready. Now from this particular line, okay, from this particular line, once a program have started entering into this particular line, we found that N1 is mentioned as 0, N2 some garbage values has been mentioned in here with all the values to be 0 zeros in here, and N2 is having a value 1, some garbage value which is not 1 actually, like, right? So let's move on to the next instruction and see. Okay, so once when I clicked on next instruction, I found that N1's value has been taken. Okay, if you need a little more detailed display, you can click on views CPU window, and you will see that it is actually moved the particular the N1 value to a memory location, right? So it is right now in here. Okay, so we are not going to too much detail on this. We will see what is happening over here. Okay, so I have now N1 value has been stored to 2. Okay, now N2 value has been changed to 3. Okay, and N3 value has been changed to 5. Fine, so now it is fine. We have all the values. Once this particular line of code has been executed, we have all the N1, N2, N3 values set. Alright, so it have introduced sum as 0, average as 0. I've gone through this line. Now after the sum value, right now the sum value is 0, okay, and we are going to sum these three numbers. Now let's see what happens once this particular instruction is over. Okay, so it is going to sum n1, n2, n3. alright, so it is going to show what is going to happen over the sum. After the sum line has been read, the sum value has changed to 10. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, right? Sum value has changed to 10. Now what will happen over the average? Alright, now once this particular line of code is compiled, you see that the value has been stored in here. So now the value of average is stored in here. Instead of 0, it have put the value sum 10 divided by 3, and since we have asked for float, it is storing the decimal value in here. Now after this particular line, till now we have nothing over here. Alright, so till now we have nothing over here. Now it is over this particular line. Once this particular line is compiled, we see that on output we have the average value displayed. This particular line has been displayed. See, so it have executed line by line. It have stored each value into the memory location, and then it did the sum, it did an average, and it displayed the result to the user using the printf command, right? Okay, so this is how a particular program is executed. I think it's very clear to every single one here.